Chapter 21. Unnamed Ridge, west of Hart Butte, Montana. 14th of April, 2021. 0700 Mountain Standard Time. The sun was coming up, its happy yellow rays starting to penetrate the dark rows of tree trunks which lined Rick Grassley's view to the west. It was still a bit chilly in the morning during this time of year, but the ground's frosty covering was quickly receding. Rick had moved out to Montana years ago, and he had never looked back. He stood now on the porch of the small cabin he had built, drinking his morning cup of coffee. To him, this was paradise. The home stood amidst the trees, but when the sun reached over those trees, the angle was just right to soak his solar panels for about half the day. That was usually enough. The only problem that could find him out here was boredom, but even that seemed like a distant memory since he had gone fully self-sufficient. His daily routine now included tending to his plants, feeding the chickens he kept in a small coop, or working on the house, completing one of the odd jobs which never seemed to be in short supply. The only time he ever went to town was for a client, and he was choosy about who those were these days. He ran a dog training program, part-time out of a borrowed facility in town. Rick gave the owner a cut and he didn't ask a lot of questions. During his time in the service, Rick had been an expert in using canines in a tactical environment. Now he mostly dealt with prepper enthusiasts, or the occasional townie who had finally gotten sick of their animal trying to steal food off the table. There weren't any landlines out here, so he used a simple flip phone to take client calls. Most of the time, however, it stayed turned off in his bedroom. He turned it on every few days to check messages and call people back. He did have one other phone, an old satellite phone that he always kept on. There were only about half a dozen people who knew the number, but when they called, it was for a good reason, good or bad. It had a slow two-tone ring, which made it sound like an old arcade game. As Rick stood on his porch drinking his coffee, waiting for his daily dose of sunlight, that two-tone sound made its way softly from the bedroom inside. It took him a minute to realize what it was. Once he did, he put down the coffee and quickly went to the source. Holding the thing in his hand, his memory of that time came back. No memory of any event in particular, just a feeling, one that he hadn't felt in a long time. It was still ringing when he made his way to it. He pushed the accept button. "This is Rick." There was a muffled sound on the other end, like someone had dropped the phone. Finally, a voice. "Rick?" Rick said nothing. He had not been able to make out the speaker until he spoke again. "Rick, this is Kai. Kai Priest." Rick almost laughed out loud. "Kailani Priest? Waterman?" He could hardly believe it. "What in the world are you calling me for?" Kai didn't sound as excited. "I wish it was on better terms, buddy." Rick's smile vanished. "What happened?" "I got some bad news. Steven Erickson is dead. I know you don't follow the news much, but it was political. They responded to a call and got left. It was a high-level decision, and now there's a cover-up." Rick said nothing. He was ashamed he could not immediately recall the last time he had seen Steven. Kai continued. "There's more. I was sick of hearing the bullshit, so I went to find out what happened. Gunnar helped me. I'm in Somalia now." "You what?" "Yeah, I know." Kai sounded resigned, like a teen who dented the family car on a joyride. "I found the guys who were responsible. I took care of it." Rick tried to absorb all of what Kai was saying. Wild, man. "You can buy me a beer later and I'll tell you everything," Kai said hurriedly. "Listen, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but I have a favor to ask." This had to be good. "And what would that be?" "You remember that op in Ukraine?" Rick remembered. He could still feel the scar on his left shoulder. "Yeah?" "You mentioned a contact you had, a WikiLeaks guy. Where is he going with this?" "Yeah, sure, I remember." "I have some information." Kai sounded relieved. "It's on a hard drive. I took it off some spook over here, and it's got more information about what happened to Steven." "Kai, are you sure you should be getting into all of this?" "This is my fight, Rick," Kai said adamantly. And even over the line he could feel the other man's pain. "I've got to finish it." Rick thought about the WikiLeaks contact. "It's been a long time since I was in that world, Kai. I don't even know if this guy will remember me." "I know. Just give it a shot for me." "Does Keikoa know you're doing all this?" "Yeah. He thinks I'm coming back to Hawaii after I get done here." Rick laughed. "I guess that's out of the question." "Listen, Rick. Give that guy a call for me," Kai pressed. "Call me back if you can reach him. And do me one other favor. Keep an eye on the news." Rick smiled. "You know I don't watch that crap, buddy. It's bad for you. When are you coming out to Montana? Kai gave a chuckle. Too cold out there for me, brother. No women, either. Well, we got a few good-looking bears. Kai laughed louder. I'll take your word for it. I gotta run, pal. I'll talk to you soon. You got it. The call disconnected and Rick looked outside. The sun had come up over the trees. It was still tranquil outside, but Rick's peace had left him. There were times when he still thought he would walk away from his old life clean, like a chapter that had closed or a play that had ended. But some time ago, he had realized that no one ever walked away from this life, no matter how far they went. It was always a part of you. It was a part of your body. It was a part of your mind, even part of your soul, like your spirit had melded with something greater. Stephen had been a part of that greater spirit, and Kai a part of it too. Rick wasn't sure how, but he knew he would get Kai what he needed. Chapter 22. Washington, D.C., April 20, 2021, 1100 Eastern Standard Time. Gary Cofield watched as his phone vibrated on his desk. The screen read, "Private number," but he knew who was calling. He sighed and picked it up. "This is Gary?" He listened as the caller spoke firmly and quickly. "Yes, Mr. President. I understand. We're getting close to a solution." More questioning. Gary's ears began to burn. "That won't be necessary. I appreciate your concern." Lecturing. Gary fought to keep his teeth from clenching. "Yes, Mr. President. You'll know as soon as I do. Thank you, sir." He hung up and let an angry hiss of air through his teeth. Swiveling in his chair, he dialed another number on his desk phone. He leaned back and waited while it rang. While he waited, he looked at all the pictures on his wall. Dozens of photo ops with politicians, bureaucrats, soldiers, businessmen. He almost likened it to a visual representation of all he had achieved over the years. People are often obsessed over institutions, police, rules, laws. But the truth was that all of that was meaningless. Human inventions, they meant nothing. The strongest constitution ever written could be unwritten with a stroke of a pen. The only thing that mattered was people. They were the source of these delusions, and by manipulating them, one could manipulate the very laws of the universe itself. Finally, the line went live. "Noah Stevens." "Noah, it's Gary," he greeted. "I just heard from the president about the investigation. I'm going to see if I can talk to some people in Congress and figure out how long we can delay this thing. I just want to make sure things are locked down on your end." Noah had assured him that the CIA had disposed of all sensitive correspondence and files relating to the Sea King incident. "We're looking good. One small issue. Don't know if you've heard." Gary rubbed his temple. "I don't need any more issues, Noah." "Mitch Stevenson, our station chief in Somalia," Noah explained heavily. "He handled this whole thing. We found out this morning that he's missing." Gary couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Missing? What the hell do you mean he's missing?" "I don't have a lot of detail yet," Noah said flatly. "It's pure chaos over there since Mombasi was assassinated. We think Mitch was killed in the fighting somehow, but they haven't been able to find a body. His laptop is gone too." "God damn it!" Gary closed his eyes and set his jaw. "Yeah, I know. But listen," he paused. "Is this line safe?" "Yes, it's my office." "We think there might be some link between the Mombasi assassination and Stevenson's death," Stevens explained. "We've been casing a suspicious person. Some missionary who entered the country through Kenya. One of Mombasi's guys called up a coordination line before everything went down and said they picked up someone from State. Only thing is, State never lost anyone. The whole thing smells like an op." "An op?" Gary's blood ran cold as his mind began to race through the implications. "Who's op?" "We don't know, but I think we might get a second chance at this. This just keeps getting better. We put out word for any suspicious activity from Somali vessels and got something back from a freighter in New York," Noah said with confidence. "Captain says he thinks someone broke in and stole some supplies from a locked room. Looked pretty professional. Perp was gone by the time they noticed. Could be a really smart Somali, but something tells me it was our missionary. There have only been 6 flights out of that country since ship popped off, and we've placed every passenger on them. How else would he have gotten out?" "How long ago was that?" "Last night. Who knows where he is now? But if he has that laptop, he might lead us right to him. The hard drive has a signaling code in it. If it hooks up to anything with an internet connection, we've got an instant homing beacon. We've got open lines of communication with SWAT commanders throughout the city. If that signal goes live anywhere in the metro area, we won't be more than 8 minutes out." "All right," Gary grimaced, grateful for at least that last bit. Let me know as soon as you know something. You'll know it as soon as I do, Noah interrupted. We need to prepare something for local law enforcement in case he slips through the net, Gary said, unwilling to underestimate this missionary for even one moment longer. Make this guy out to be an international terrorist, armed and dangerous. Whatever it takes to dial the boys in blue up to shoot on sight. Know what I mean? I can do that, Stevens agreed. Keep me updated, Gary commanded before ending the call. It baffled him how this thing had gotten so far away from them. Every minute spent dialing with issues like this was a minute wasted not moving their agenda forward. They needed to get off defense and back onto offense. Opportunities to reshape the world came once in a generation, and he would be damned if he let his slip away. Fortunately, the Bingle search optimization tools seemed to be working well. They were also using similar features with other major outlets like Facebook and Twitter. YouTube was always a bit harder, but Bingle assured them that they were getting things under tighter control every day. The more he thought about it, the more he liked the new media. It was far more effective. It was self-correcting, self-perpetuating, easy to control, and most importantly, it was impossible to avoid. Every day their message went straight into the hands of every single person in the country. They had to read it. There was no option to turn it off, at least not if you wanted to be connected to the world. And every day they made sure there was less and less world anywhere outside of that connection. He would need to check in on Gerald Morgan again soon. The FBI had done a nice job squashing any inquiry over the Texas incident, but Gary didn't want to rest on their laurels. As far as he was concerned, he couldn't be careful enough. If there was one thing he had learned over the years, it was that a sloppy cover-up was even worse than no cover-up at all. And this one was getting dangerously close to sloppy. Chapter 23. New York City, New York. April 27, 2021, 1900 Eastern Standard Time. Kai pulled his ball cap a bit lower as he made his way down the busy street. It had been nearly a week since he had spoken to Rick about where to meet his contact from WikiLeaks, and Kai hoped that no details of the planned meeting had changed. He knew very well he could be walking into a trap, but he had little choice. Without the information on the hard drive he carried in his jacket, he was at a dead end. It was sure to be encrypted, so there was no way to do this without an expert. He hadn't been to New York since coming here for a field trip as a boy, and now he was reminded why. Everything that Hawaii was, New York was the exact opposite. Where Hawaii was warm, New York was cold. While Hawaii was natural, New York was man-made. And where the islands were welcoming to all, this concrete jungle was unfriendly, bordering on outright hostile. Still, there was something vaguely attractive about the anonymity here. So many people, so many nooks and crannies, it seemed someone could disappear around any corner. It would be a different kind of disappearance than removing to somewhere remote, but one would be just as well hidden. He pulled his luggage bag behind him as he made his way to the other side of the street, weaving around a speeding car as he crossed. The hotel was just down the way, the Bentley. Kai had scouted the location before arriving. Located directly next to the East River, the hotel overlooked the 59th Street Bridge. It was out of the way and close to the water, just as he wanted. The front of the hotel was covered by a modern-looking metal overhang. Kai made his way in through the automatic doors. The lobby of the hotel was nice but inconspicuous, containing the check-in desk, a small bar, and some lounge chairs. Kai approached the clerk. "Hello," he greeted. "I'm checking in under a reservation for Adam Hancock." He waited while the clerk typed. He had been instructed by the contact to proceed directly to room 601. However, he had reserved a room on the top floor as well, for his own purposes. "I'm staying here with my brother," Kai lied. "He is in room 601. Could you tell me if he already checked in?" The clerk typed for a moment. "Yes, sir. He checked in last night." Bingo. The clerk gave him a room key and Kai walked past the elevator, making his way to the stairwell. Inside was a relatively simple layout. The shaft was about 10 feet by 10 feet. He lifted his bag and made his way to the 6th floor. Reaching the door, Kai took a deep breath and knocked. There was some movement from inside the room, and finally the door latch turned and the door cracked. "I didn't order anything," the man said, his Ukrainian accent betraying him. "This is on the house," Kai replied as he had been instructed. The door swung open. Before him was a slim but fit, pale-looking man, with beady eyes and hair pushed to the side and extending down to where it met a neatly trimmed beard. He extended his hand. "Nice to meet you. I am Yanni." "Likewise. I'm Kai." "Come in," Yanni gestured invitingly. "Shall we get started?" "Sure. Did you bring the papers Rick sent you?" "Yes, they are here." The man reached into a bag and retrieved a manila folder sealed in a Ziploc bag. Great. Kai slid the packet into his luggage. Reaching into his jacket, he retrieved the hard drive. Here it is. Kai paused a moment. I just want to make sure you know what you're getting into here. The man smiled. I am sure I have been into worse. Kai wasn't sure he agreed, but he nodded and handed over the device. Yanni unwrapped it gingerly and placed it on the desk near the wall. Then, reaching into his bag again, he retrieved a laptop computer. He also produced a small device that resembled a credit card reader, which he connected to his laptop with a cord. Here we go. Yanni took the hard drive and carefully inserted it into the device he had connected. Kai waited nervously as the man pulled up what looked like a command prompt window and began to type. Password and card protected, of course. I will need to get around this, Yanni said dismissively. This should only take a few minutes. Kai watched him work for a few minutes and then looked outside. It was raining lightly, and it looked like it would be dark soon. Yanni spoke again. Almost done. And we are in. Let me see if I can access any files. He typed for a few more minutes. Okay, here we go. Did you bring a flash drive? Kai reached into his pocket and retrieved the flash drive he had purchased earlier that day. Excellent. I will transfer the files I can find, Yanni explained. What you do with it from here will be your business. What are you going to do? Kai asked. I will submit files to my boss, and he will decide what to do, Yanni replied. If there is anything of interest, we will publish. All of it. There had to be something on here. Mitch Stevenson, the CIA station chief, had been the one who had organized the entire attack with Mombasi. That was huge in and of itself. And if he had done that, he had certainly known about the CAG team response and communicated with someone about it. At the very least, there had to be something explaining why the op had been planned, and who Stevenson would have contacted once the CAG team showed up. That was all Kai needed. Kai couldn't wait to watch them trying to explain this away. Kai watched as the file transfer began and the loading bar slowly filled. 1%, 5%, 10%. There was a sudden, loud bang in the hallway. Yanni and Kai looked at one another in mutual understanding. How much longer? Kai pressed. Just another moment, Yanni said hastily. Were you followed? No. How can you be? Kai held up a halting hand and whispered, Be quiet. Kai looked at the loading screen. 70%. He walked over to his bag and unzipped it. He removed the AK-47 from inside and inserted the magazine. Here we go. Chapter 24. New York City, New York. April 27, 2021. 1945 Eastern Standard Time. The van skidded to a stop and the door slid open. The team jumped out, one by one, each checking their MP5 carbines as they exited. They switched off the safeties and went into the low-ready position. One of them held the automatic door open as the others rushed in. Several squad cars pulled in behind them, with their uniformed officers running towards the door. The headset squawked. Bravo team is covering the rear exit. All teams are go to initiate contact. Room 601, 2 targets. Several members of the team approached the clerk as they entered the lobby, guns raised. Once the docent was bound and gagged, the engineers had finished cutting the elevator line. Delta has the south stairwell covered, breaching north stairwell. They entered the stairwell and began to clear upwards, leaving someone at the entrance to each floor as they went. Once they reached the top, they stopped. Alpha is in position. Delta is in position, reported Yannick, the team leader assigned to secure room 601. Copy that, breach teams. Targets are assumed hostile, weapons free. They pushed open the doors from the stairwell and entered the hallway. The engineer team was in tow with the door ram. The units moved down the hallway slowly. The door opened to their left. A female civilian began to walk out and froze when she saw them. One of the engineers tackled her, dropping the ram with a loud bang as he did. We're compromised. Hasty breach! Hasty breach! They quickened pace down the hallway. Room 601 was on the left. Someone finally got the ram off the floor and they stacked onto the door. The team leader gave the signal and the breacher bashed the ram into the door. Nothing. He bashed again and the door swung open. Flash out! Yannick commanded, and his men threw 2 stun grenades through the opening. After a second, one of the grenades came back and struck the far wall. Cover! Yannick was cut off mid-word by the flashbang. Open fire! He bellowed, and they poured fire into the room. The hallway rattled with lengthy bursts of 9mm MP5 fire. 2 seconds into their fire, thick smoke billowed into the hallway, filling it with surprising speed and snuffing out the light. Whose fucking smoke is that? Someone screamed. Gunfire erupted from within the room. It was full auto, and not 9mm. Shots from inside! Shoot the fucking walls! Yannick snarled. The smoke was choking them now. Several of the men went down from a mix of smoke and enemy fire. We need the fucking standby team! Breach the fucking room! Yannick barked. They waded through the smoke, one by one into the room. One of the team shot the windows and the smoke began to dissipate through the shattered glass. Team leaders, status report! They tried to take stock of the room. Shell casings littered the floor. A man lay motionless on the floor, the top of his head a gory mess. His blood was already soaking the carpet. A laptop was at his feet, hooked into a corded device. Check him and secure that item, Yannick ordered. Team leaders, what is your status? We have 2... Check that, we have 3 friendlies down, Yannick replied, seeing at least one of his men would be leaving the scene feet first. 1 hostile is down. We need assistance. How copy? How copy? There were more shots outside the door, down the hallway. Who's doing the fucking shooting? Yannick demanded. We have a hostile in the stairwell. We have multiple hostiles in the stair... The line cut mid-sentence. They ran out towards the sounds. Stay together! Yannick bellowed as he ran down the hallway. Tighten up! They reached the stairwell, and an officer was already down. What the fuck was that? One of his men asked in unvarnished horror as his eyes fixed on something protruding from the downed man's neck. It was long and slender, like an oversized arrow. Stay quiet, Yannick snapped. Move, move, move! Delta, proceed to the roof. Alpha, cover the ground floor. Yannick led his men up the stairs, where they kicked open the door. Shit! The hallway was filled with more smoke. It was even thicker than before. Something was moving through the smoke, barreling clumsily down the hallway. Engage! Yannick barked, and his men opened fire. 9mm casings splashed on the ground as round after round went down the hallway. There was a scream and the lumbering figure fell. But Yannick's men were panicked and they continued to fire. Cease fire! Cease fire! Yannick snapped, backhanding one of his men behind the head when he failed to comply. When his men had ceased fire, he moved up the hall. Keep moving! They came to a body on the ground, face down. Team leaders, what's your status? Second target is down, one of his men replied, drawing a wrathful glare from Yannick for usurping the chain of command. Confirm, second target is down? Flip that fucking body over, Yannick grimaced, gesturing to the far end of the hall. Cover the end of this hallway. Confirm, second target, Caucasian female, is down, one of Yannick's men reported. Negative, team. The second target is Polynesian male. Yannick's men couldn't see each other in all of the smoke, but they all heard the resumption of gunfire. 9mm extended bursts. Shooter, what is your target? Get up the stairs, Yannick ordered. Keep clearing the stairs! He knew they would have to clear every room at this point. There were several more shots, louder than the 9mm, followed by screams from the far stairwell. Team leaders, recent check-ins in rooms 706 and 302. Proceed to rooms. They moved towards room 706, right side. The remaining team members stacked on the door. Get the door down, Yannick barked. Shotgun! Someone ran forward with the shotgun and blasted the handle and hinges. They kicked the door over and cleared into the empty room. This whole op had gone from bad to worse. He'd be filling out paperwork for a year and be lucky to keep his pension if the downed woman was a civilian. Room 706 is clear, he seethed. We've got nothing. The window's open, one of his men reported. They all looked at the blown-out window. Confirmed. We've got an open window, Yannick reported. He moved over to the window, clearing the concrete ledge before looking down. There was nothing outside but the 59th Street Bridge, and about 8 stories of air between him and the water. No one could survive a jump like that, he thought with conviction. Outside, the night was cold and filled with the sounds of sirens, their red lights flashing off the surfaces of the surrounding buildings. Team leader, what are you saying? Did he commit fucking suicide? One of Yannick's men asked in bewilderment. Yannick shook his head grimly, his thoughts turning to his wife and children, whose father would probably lose his job over this fucking mess. But there was nothing for it now, so he drew a steadying breath and gave what might be the final tactical report of his career. We have one open window, and no visual on the target. I repeat. The words tasted like ashes as they passed his lips. We've lost the target. Chapter 25. New York City, New York. April 27, 2021. 20:30 Eastern Standard Time. Kai lost his breath as he hit the water beneath the 59th Street Bridge. Damn zipline cable, he thought irritably. He had fired the zipline from the 7th floor. It looked like a good contact with the bridge, but when he had swung out, it hadn't held for more than a few seconds. Damn close call. Still, it was enough to get him to the water. Another gift from Keikoa. Yanni, the WikiLeaks contact, was dead, shot in the head by the SWAT team. Kai had to get out of the area. Soon they would have the banks of the river lined for miles. He took stock of himself. He had burned his right hand on the barrel of one of their carbines, and he had been shot in the left leg. It was a through and through and didn't seem to be bleeding too badly. Other than that, he was okay. A good outcome considering the circumstances. He started to power stroke towards the center of the river. It was dark now, but he could see the lights of a vessel coming his direction. It approached, and he was able to grab one of the docking bumpers hanging from the tow rail. He took several deep breaths and calmed his heart rate. He would need to conserve his strength, and he needed to dress his leg. Some time passed as his unwitting taxi carried him upriver, and once the lights of the city began to fade, he released his grip on the bumper and swam towards the shore. It was a longer swim than he had expected, and by the time he finally reached it, he had to drag himself ashore. He lay for a moment, feeling uncomfortably cold. He felt for the flash drive in his pocket, still there. He had been forced to abandon most of his equipment, but he still had a few spear tips and his satellite phone and his waterproof clamshell he would need to resupply. Pulling himself up, he limped farther from the water. He looked to be in a residential neighborhood. He was probably in New Jersey, another place he had no desire to visit. Selecting a house that appeared empty, Kai lifted the garage door and looked inside. No car. He knocked on the door. No movement inside. Once he was satisfied, he stood on his left leg and kicked the door open with his right, wincing in pain. He made his way down the hall towards what he presumed to be the kitchen. There were some photos hung on the wall. It looked like an older couple. It was a quaint, homey place decorated with little stone rabbits and pictures that said family is everything. These were good people. It was a shame to ruin their door. Inside the kitchen, Kai managed to find some rubbing alcohol in a medicine cabinet. He couldn't find any gauze, but he did locate some hand towels and an ace bandage. That would have to be good enough. He ripped the towels into thin lengths and went about fixing his leg. Once he was done, he made his way upstairs and found some dry clothes. He folded the wet ones and placed them neatly in a box at the back of the closet. He paused for a moment and thought. His stomach ached with hunger. He went back to the kitchen and found a full jar of peanut butter. He pulled a spoon from a nearby drawer and ate about half of the jar, putting roughly 4,000 calories down as he contemplated his next move. He needed to get out of New Jersey and find a computer. He thought for a moment. Maybe. He left the peanut butter on the kitchen table and walked into the den. Bingo. There was an old desktop computer in the corner, set up on an old desk set with a bookshelf. There were a few pictures of the old man with some younger people set on top of it who looked like his relatives. Sitting down, he turned the computer on. It took a moment to boot up, but once it did, there were two accounts, Jim's PC and Guest. Posing as Jim, he logged on without need for a password. Now the moment of truth. He removed the flash drive from his pocket and inserted it into the tower. After a moment, the system recognized it and he was in. There were dozens of folders, and surely each contained hundreds of files. This could take hours. He tried to think how to narrow things down. He sorted by recently altered. The most recent folders were labeled Photos, Archive, and Langley Updates. Kai selected the latter. It was filled with Word documents. He opened the most recent, scanning the contents. Government bargaining positions appeared to be weakening. We fear conflict is imminent. Troops are inadequately prepared. We are requesting immediate supplies of heavy machine guns and grenade launchers, along with any private security that is available in the region, ASAP. Kai wondered if Gunner had gotten the call. He smiled, imagining the Texans' reaction. Kai went back out to the other files. Most of them were named by the date they were written. Kai searched back to February. We were aware of VIP civilians on board, but unaware that the daughter of POTUS would be present. Stand-down orders were received from an executive-level source and carried out before this information became known to us. Need full briefing on undisclosed details of this op. He clicked through more files and continued to read. All details of the unplanned response have been classified top secret. Navy Commander Robert Carmichael spoke with someone in White House and is threatening to go public. Unpredictable variable. The farther he went, the more he found. Every time he thought he was at a dead end, he found something else that spurred him on. Captain Carmichael confirmed dead this morning in Texas. FBI sources affirm the job was carried out by members of the Sonora Cartel. The investigation is being handled by FBI agent Gerald Morgan. We are continuing to monitor the situation but consider the incident tied off due to removal of hard sources. Kai read, and read, and read. There was nothing more about why the response was called off, why the team had been left. He could hardly stand to read anymore. This would not stand for as long as he still drew air. Robert Carmichael had known why the response had been delayed. He had been killed for trying to share it. Now the truth lay with those who had arranged his murder at the hands of Mexican thugs. Mitch Stevenson was already gone, but this FBI agent, Gerald Morgan, was still out there. Kai looked at his watch. It would be light in a few hours. He could do nothing more with these documents, this final hard source, but he knew someone who could. Chapter 26. Louisiana-Texas border, May 1st, 2021, 1830 Eastern Standard Time. Gerald Morgan's car sped along Highway 9 as he crossed into Louisiana. He rolled the window up and cranked the air conditioner. Damn place was so hot, even the wind was hot. Only a little while longer here and he would be called back up to D.C., with his obligatory field service under his belt. For now, though, the comfort of D.C. seemed like a distant fantasy. The longer this investigation went on, the more nervous it made him. Matters like this, where the press was all over everything they did, where politicians were calling his office, where he had to give daily updates to the Justice Department. It felt like a bomb waiting to go off. Something would blow up eventually. He just hoped to not be around when it did. He looked out the window at the country rolling by. Long stretches of flat swamp, a carpet of tall reeds laid across the boggy earth like a vast rug. The next day, he would meet with investigators from all over the southern region. They would all share updates about their respective investigations, offering each other tips and questions, but the main focus, like always, would be on him. What happened in Texas? It nearly made him sick thinking about it. Since the Carmichael affair had begun a few weeks ago, he barely had a chance to breathe. Technically, the investigation was still open, but there hadn't been any new developments since the press conference they held after it was opened. He had been asked to take on several other new investigations since, but the majority of his time was still spent answering inquiries about Carmichael. When will you release the autopsy? When will you release photos of the home? Have you reached any family members? It never ended. He remembered being a new agent. He would have killed for a case like this. Had he only known what it would really be like. No freedom, no right answers, unbelievable pressure. Now all he wanted was a cushy desk job back in D.C. where he could ride it out until retirement. This was far too risky. He was smart enough now to know to avoid jobs like this. He had picked Eastern Texas because it was far away and nothing ever happened. It was supposed to be in and out. Simple. Clockwork. But it had all gone to shit. He could almost laugh at his unlikely misfortune. Almost. Carmichael had most certainly not committed suicide, and whoever had arranged for his death most certainly had their reasons. But that was of little concern to him. As far as he knew, the guy had it coming. Gerald just needed to keep this thing under wraps for a few more weeks until it blew over, or they assigned the case to some wide-eyed chump. He finally reached his exit and pulled his silver Buick around the bend. He came out on a smaller road and continued east. He would stay tonight at the Venton Marriott before continuing towards the field office in Baton Rouge the next day. Venton hardly qualified as a town. It came up out of the wetlands like a ghost of some forgotten place and disappeared just as quickly. He stayed there because it happened to have a decent hotel about halfway between Houston and Baton Rouge. But he never stuck around very long to sightsee on any of his visits. This time would be no different. After another hour, he pulled into Venton and found the Marriott. Pulling into the parking lot, he shut off the car and waited, sighing while rubbing his temple. He tried to decide if getting a drink was worth the trouble of making small talk with the bartender. Maybe later. He took his suitcase from the back seat and made his way to the check-in desk. He got his keycard and made his way to his room. He stayed in the same room every time. It was predictable. Clockwork. Just the way he liked it. He unlocked the door and threw his suitcase on the plush chair in the corner. Unbuttoning his shirt, he sprawled out on the bed. He lay there a moment and then got up to use the bathroom. He opened the bathroom door and cried out, falling over backwards. There, wearing a black ski mask, was a man standing in the bathroom. "No, no!" Gerald stammered. "Please!" This was it. This was how it ended. Killed by some cartel thug in the middle of nowhere on the order of someone a rung or two up the ladder. He scrambled towards the door, but the thug was on top of him before the second step. Gerald fought viciously to escape his iron grip. The thug landed 2 hard blows to his head. "No, no!" Gerald panicked. "Not like this! I'll pay you anything, please!" Gerald cried out as he felt the tears welling up in his eyes. "Please!" The man said nothing. He struck him again, and then pulled a white rag from his pocket. "No!" Gerald screamed louder than before. The man hit him again, harder this time. Vertigo washed over him in unrelenting waves of sickening darkness. The rag was over his face before he regained his senses. Gerald tried again to struggle free, but his muscles failed to respond. The room was spinning harder now, and the fear left him as all went to darkness. It was dark when he awoke. What happened? He thought groggily. Am I in the hotel? He tried to move and realized he was bound. There was something covering his mouth. He began to panic, kicking and trying to sit up. He was in some kind of box. Oh God, I've been buried alive! He struggled harder and tried to cry out. Suddenly there was a bump, and he realized he was moving. He was in the trunk of a car. He felt a split second of relief and then another wave of terror. Where are they taking me? Why me? He continued to kick for a few minutes and eventually gave up. It was useless. He began to cry pitifully when he felt the car lurch around a bend. They must have been on gravel now. He had to get out of here. He couldn't even imagine where they must have headed. He tried to feel his pockets. Nothing. They were empty now. He tried to remember something from his training. Anything. All he could bring to mind were endless slides about how to report a suspicious person. Shit, I'm going to die. Every few moments, a new wave of panic came over him. Suddenly, the car lurched again, then a second time. Before coming to a halt, he heard the door open again. This is it. He felt his guts tighten. Chapter 27. Marshlands, somewhere south of Port Arthur, Texas. May 1st, 2021. 0400 Eastern Standard Time. Kai exited the car and looked around. Cicadas chirped in the night, imbuing the swamp with their melodies of life. A quick look around confirmed the place would serve its purpose. He had taken a bus from New Jersey and then lifted an old beater car from somewhere in New Orleans before grabbing the agent at his hotel. It had been a long day and his leg ached from the gunshot wound back in New York, but he was finally back on track. By the looks of the guy in the trunk, this wouldn't take long. He had been easy enough to find and even easier to ambush. Kai wasn't sure what they were teaching at the FBI, but the agent had stayed in the same hotel room every few weeks for the past year. Kai had expected a tougher case from a federal agent, but he had simply staked out the room and waited for him. It was cooler at night, but still muggy. The heat here was oppressive, with no ocean breeze to soften it. Kai heard Gerald struggle in the trunk of the car. He opened it and looked in. He almost pitied the man, who looked as if he might die from sheer terror. Kai went to pick him up and Gerald began to writhe uncontrollably. Kai gave him a few jabs to the nose and he calmed down. Kai put him over his shoulder and walked a short distance into the woods. Seeing a suitable tree, he dropped the man with a thud. Then, positioning him up against the tree, Kai took out a roll of duct tape and began to bind the man to the trunk. He went around and around until the roll was expended. Once he was done, he removed the tape from the man's mouth. Gerald immediately started screaming. Please! Please! No! Stop screaming, Kai said flatly. No one can hear you. Please don't kill me! Please! Kai smacked him. Stop screaming. The man surprisingly went silent. He looked like he would cry, and smelled like he might have already pissed himself. Kai knelt down and spoke again. I need some information from you, Kai said calmly. You're going to give it to me, or you're going to die. I will know if you're lying. The man's eyes bulged and he started to struggle against his bindings. Kai popped him a few more times before speaking again. Stop and listen to me. You're not getting away, Kai said matter-of-factly. I don't want to kill you, but I will. All I need is information. So you're either going to work with me, or you're going to die out here. The man looked at him, terrified. What do you want to know? Is this about Carmichael? Yes. I can't tell you anything. I can't. Gerald frantically shook his head. I'll end up dead. You don't really have a choice. Kai shrugged with genuine indifference. You're going to end up dead right here unless you start talking. Something in Gerald's face changed, and his resolve seemed to melt away. What do you want to know? Why was he killed? Please just let me go, he pleaded desperately. Kai hit him again, sending a dribble of blood out of his nose. You have 10 seconds. I don't know, the agent squealed. It was some kind of traitor. Who ordered the killing? Kai pressed. I don't know. Kai hit him a few more times, feeling the man's nose crunch beneath his knuckles on the last punch. I don't know. Gerald's voice was wet and congested as blood flowed freely onto his shirt. I swear I don't know. It was arranged. Did the Attorney General know about it? Kai demanded. Did he shut down the investigation? The pitiful man looked miserable, broken and bleeding, but he made no verbal reply as all he could manage were whimpers. Kai stood up. Of course he did. And the Attorney General got his orders from someone too. After all, Why would he care about some rescue mission in Somalia? He wondered aloud as he fit the pieces together in his mind. A cleverer man might have done it weeks ago, but Kai walked his own path to the truth. He looked down at the bound and bloodied agent, nodding in growing conviction as he continued. Robert Carmichael knew something about the whole thing, and whatever he knew was big enough that someone who can order around the Attorney General had him killed over it. But what did Robert Carmichael know? Gerald shook his head. I don't know. I swear I don't know. Kai believed him. This guy wasn't a mastermind. He was part of the cleanup crew. Whoever orchestrated this whole thing was in the White House or had sway over the president. Maybe it's the president himself, Kai wondered with sudden, jarring alarm. This meeting you were going to, Kai began in dawning realization at the magnitude of what he had walked into. Was the Attorney General going? How do you think this works? Gerald blurted incredulously. He doesn't attend our meetings. I'd never even talked to him before all this. The office in Baton Rouge. The gears of Kai's mind had already begun to turn in producing a new plan. Would they have a copy of his travel schedule? I don't know, maybe. How do I get in there? The man said nothing for a long while until Kai broke the silence. Gerald, start talking or this gets worse. You need a badge, the agent shook his head. They look at your face, you can't get in. This was going to be complex. Kai would need some support. This whole thing was getting deeper and deeper. But he was down the rabbit hole so deep that he couldn't turn back. And he wasn't even sure if he wanted to know what was at the end, or if he would be able to turn back if he found out. He sighed and began to walk back to the car. Gerald yelled out at him as he walked away. Where are you going? I'm leaving. What about me? The bound agent asked in a half-demanding, half-pleading tone. What about you? You can't just leave me out here, please! Kai turned to make unflinching eye contact. Let me explain something to you, Gerald. Robert Carmichael, a ship's captain in the U.S. Navy, was murdered for trying to expose a cover-up. That cover-up was about why 5 American Marines and sailors were abandoned and left to die during a routine rescue op. You willingly lied to millions of people so that the deaths of those warriors could be swept under the rug. His voice broke with emotion as he finished. Those warriors were my friends. They are this country, and you betrayed them. You are a traitor. The color drained from Gerald's face as Kai made his way to the car. The cicadas were beginning to quiet and give way to the chirps of morning birds. He turned the ignition and pulled out onto the dirt road. Dust kicked up as he drove away, and soon Kai could no longer see Gerald Morgan. Chapter 28. New York City, New York. May 10, 2021. 0900 Eastern Standard Time. When Leilani arrived at the office that morning, the package had been on her desk. In a padded manila envelope, the address was hand-scrawled. She had opened it, finding nothing inside but a small, black flash drive. There was no note, no return address, nothing. Now the drive sat on her desk on top of an envelope, otherwise untouched. She sat staring at it. From a policy standpoint, she should either dispose of it or send it to the leads department to be vetted. However, looking at it now, she could not bring herself to do it. There were too many questions, too much curiosity. What could it be? Her first thought had been that it was a virus sent by some creep who had read one of her articles or watched too many YouTube videos about the liberal media. But if that was the case, why wouldn't they have tried to make it easier to trust? Some compelling note or an invitation to a lead. The fact that they hadn't left a note made it seem like the person sending it trusted her to view it. Could it have come from Brian in D.C.? Something more about Segway Capital that he had left out? If she used her work laptop to open it and something went wrong, she could compromise the whole network, to say nothing of the disciplinary consequences. But if she used her personal laptop, the worst that could happen would be a broken laptop and a lesson learned. It was using that logic, which was admittedly far from foolproof, that she decided she would use her personal laptop to view whatever was on the drive or otherwise. But she would do it at home, far from prying eyes. Once the weight of the decision had been lifted, she felt giddy and could hardly wait to get started. That evening, she took the subway home an hour early, practically running the 2 blocks to the metro station from the office. The weather was starting to get warmer now, and the smells in the tunnels were beginning to get stronger. She fought her way through the sea of commuters and managed to make it onto the first train. Moving through the seas of people every day had never been her favorite part of the city, but it never made her nervous until recently. It seemed like there was another terrorist or extremist attack just about every week now. Just a few days ago, there was a shooting at the Bentley Hotel. Some lunatic WikiLeaks hacker had shot a bunch of civilians and then a bunch of cops as they tried to stop him, before they finally killed him. The news was still going on about it, replaying the whole gun control debate again. Depressing. Arriving exactly 17 minutes later at her stop, she worked her way through the same crowd in reverse and up to the street again. The neighborhood around her apartment took on a new life in the spring, and the whole place felt cheerier. The sapling trees that lined her street had produced bright pink flowers and were already beginning to show their summer leaves. Their smell reminded her of home, so far away. Once inside her apartment, she took off her jacket and shoes and went straight to work. Carefully unpacking the flash drive, she inserted it into the slot on the side of her computer and waited. Sure enough, a file window opened. She clicked through the titles, careful not to open anything too hastily. The first thing she noticed was the sheer number of folders and files, titled in every possible way from dates to names to arcane monikers such as C2 logs. She scrolled for a few minutes before noticing the obvious. There, at the very top of the list, with a timestamp only a few days old, was a text document named "To the New York Times." Hesitantly, Leilani opened it. Leilani, these are all the files found on Mitchell Stevenson's computer before his death. The truth lives or dies with you. Who was Mitchell Stevenson? Leilani opened a browser window. A quick Bingle search returned the result. CIA confirms 3 agents killed in Somali fighting. She felt the excitement of new discovery come over her. However, it quickly turned to impatience as she realized there were hundreds of files to go through with no obvious indications of what she was looking for. What did this person want her to know? How was she supposed to comb through this much information? After a few hours, she began to make some progress. The whole thing was just a file dump from someone's computer, presumably Mitchell Stevenson. Most of it was just garbage. Everything from mundane emails to pictures of him at the beach with what looked like his boyfriend. But eventually, she had found the daily situation reports that he had been sending back to Langley. This was where it started to get interesting. It was nearly midnight and an order of Chinese food later before she began to put the pieces together. She stabbed at her General Tso's chicken with a chopstick as she finished writing up her timeline. She had started with a blank piece of paper and summarized everything she knew. First, the attack on the Sea King had clearly been planned before with knowledge of the CIA. However, it appeared that the plan had gone badly sideways as they were unaware that the president's daughter would be on board. Where it got even weirder was that it looked like orders to delay their rescue efforts, or stand down, had come from the White House. That didn't make any sense. The Special Forces team that had arrived at the ship must have been unplanned, which is why they were abandoned. The Navy commander in the region, Robert Carmichael, must have received the stand-down orders himself directly from the White House, and after the Special Forces operators had been killed, tried to go public with details about what happened. If that wasn't bad enough, then there was a cover-up. Robert Carmichael hadn't committed suicide. Someone had ordered him murdered. The why was clear to her now, but who had given the order, and how had it been carried out? Then there was the whole piece about Henry Steinway. His company, Segway Capital, had purchased the yacht company that chartered the Sea King just a few weeks before the incident happened, and then liquidated the company afterwards. Clearly, this was all organized as part of the planned attack. When things went wrong, the company had been liquidated in an attempt to cover all this up. But why would Henry Steinway be working with the CIA? Henry Steinway was one of the largest personal donors to the Ansari campaign. The clear answer was that someone in the White House must have involved him, not the CIA. All signs pointed to this cover-up originating in the White House. But why? The implications of all this were staggering. Once she realized the scope of what she was dealing with, it began to dawn on her that she was in great danger. Robert Carmichael had been killed over what he knew, and now she knew nearly as much. And whatever the cause, Mitchell Stevenson, a CIA agent, was now also dead. She could not publish any of this without corroborative evidence, and more importantly, a path to her own safety. Moreover, she was still baffled by who could have sent her this information. Was this some kind of loyalty test? Should she contact the FBI? Who did she know in Somalia? Of course, there was one person she knew that may have been somewhere like that, but they hadn't spoken in years. It can't be. She thought as a seed of doubt sprouted in the back of her mind. Can it? Chapter 30. Gulf of Mexico, off the coast of Galveston, Texas. May 2nd, 2021. 10:00 Central Daylight Time. The sun was now starting to get hot, and in combination with the ocean breeze, its rays felt like a warm embrace. It had been far too long since AG Larry Handler had been on vacation. Since becoming Attorney General, it had been nothing but work and travel, but seemingly never to anywhere nice. DC had barely shaken the winter frost, but this place seemed to be in the heat of summer already. He leaned back in his seat and let the warmth wash over him. "Your breakfast, gentlemen?" One of the vessel's staff placed their omelets on the small table, located on the stern side of the yacht. "Are you enjoying yourself, Mr. Handler?" "Very much so, Antonio," Larry replied to the yacht's owner. "Thank you." "I'm glad, but perhaps we can return to what we were discussing last evening," Antonio Bendejos urged. He was the chief financial officer of Petrobras, a Mexican oil conglomerate. A rather joyless man by Larry's estimation, but perhaps with good reason, given his company's financial situation. "I spoke with Mr. Cofield again this morning," Larry explained. "He has assured me that everything has proceeded as we discussed. 3 large investments over the next 6 months. "I understand," Antonio said flatly. "But in regard to what we discussed regarding certain investigations?" "I will see what we can do." Larry took a sip of water. Antonio leaned forward, clearly agitated. "You must understand. We were assured of this before the agreement took place. We must follow through. We rely on these forces for our protection, and simply paying them will not be enough. Unless, of course, you are able to provide us with this protection." "Perhaps you should speak to your own government about protection from criminals," the Attorney General said dismissively. "We have upheld our end of the agreement. I will see what I can do regarding these investigations you speak of, but I can assure you that the United States government, the FBI, and this administration take the war on drugs very seriously, and we cannot simply turn a blind eye." "Mr. Handler, please," Antonio cut in tersely. "We're not asking you to turn a blind eye. 20%. A 20% reduction in confiscation for this year will be enough." "I am at liberty to consider a 15% reduction, no more," the AG easily retorted. One of the staff came over to the table, but Antonio ignored him as his expression grew furious. "I apologize for the interruption, sir," the crewman said urgently, "but I wanted to make you aware of a security concern. It appears a small craft has been following us for some time. We're going to stop and direct them to leave the area." Antonio waved him away like a fly. "Fine, take care of it. Do not interrupt us again." "I apologize, sir." Larry looked behind the yacht and shrugged. Probably just some tourist. Antonio shook his head dismissively. "Mr. Handler, you must understand that our original agreement was for no less than 30%. 30%. "Don't tell me what I must understand, Antonio," Larry quipped. "I was not involved in the original agreement. I have a job to do. You must understand that. Now please." He gestured to the untouched plate before his host. "Let's finish our breakfast. Perhaps we can still discuss some exceptions." Antonio grudgingly took a bite, and they ate for a few moments in silence, silverware clanging against their white porcelain plates. Antonio snapped at one of the waiters. "Take these drinks and bring us another round." The waiter complied. After a few minutes, he returned with the drinks. "What's going on?" Antonio demanded. "When are we going to move again?" "We sent a vessel out, sir, but they have not returned yet," a crewman replied uncertainly. "It appears that the occupant of the craft has gone into the water and has not surfaced yet." "What?" Antonio snapped. "Is he a fucking diver?" "I do not know, sir," the crewman replied. "Fine." Antonio turned back to the Attorney General. "You know you will have me killed. This is all a game to you. But you will not be so happy once you no longer have anyone to work with." "No one is going to get killed, Antonio," Larry said with patronizing calm. "Have you ever considered other options, such as coming to the United States? I'm sure we could enter you into a witness protection program. You could rid yourself of all these parasites once and for all." "Witness protection?" Antonio sneered. "And what of my family?" "Well, sure, they could come too." "And our home? Our possessions? Could those come too?" Antonio spat. "Please, Mr. Handler, let us stay on the matter at hand. I need 20%, or I cannot say what the consequences will be." "And what exactly is that supposed to mean?" Larry asked measuredly. There was some yelling from the bow of the yacht, distant and indistinct. Antonio seemed not to notice the commotion as he replied. "It is by a very thin leash that these people are contained. We must keep our word. We will both suffer from a betrayal of these people." "Listen, the number is 15%, Larry said irritably. "If we can work out some kind of deal for a high-value target, I can go higher. It's that simple." There was more yelling, and then a scream. "What the hell is going on up there?" Antonio looked around for a waiter. Crack! Crack! The percussion echoed across the water. Gunshots. The color drained from Antonio's face as he stood. "Do you see what you have done now?" Larry stood as well, wondering if Antonio was right. One of the staff came running past, and he grabbed the man by the arm. "What the fuck is going on up there?" Larry demanded, as a note of panic entered his voice. For obvious reasons, this visit wasn't on his official schedule, which meant he had no protective detail other than Antonio's men. He suddenly realized just how vulnerable he was as another gunshot rang out from the yacht's forward deck. "Get us out of here!" Larry released the man, who ran inside the vessel. Antonio followed him, and Larry came behind them, shutting the door.